Good evening, curious listeners, and welcome to Wilhelm Presents Frightening Tales and Other Weird Stories. I'm your host, Wilhelm. Each week I invite you to dim the lights and settle in as we explore a dark and unsettling tale of the paranormal. Stories conjured by authors from all around the world. If you dare to share a fiction of your own, submit it at frighteningtales.com. And should you find yourself still hungry, there's more than 130 episodes awaiting you, patiently in the dark. Today's tale is written by C.N Webster, an English horror dark fantasy writer who has lived in the U.S. for the past 15 years. He is the author of Bad Blood, a book available through Amazon, a link in the notes. Here's his tale, A Sympathy for Strays.
What's the worst thing you've ever done? His voice was a tremolo that rose clear above the cicadas and the crickets in the fir-tree-filled woodlands. The words bound and sunk with the fog and the slow drip of rainwater from knotted tree limbs. His breathing was shallow, and his emaciated body still, as he observed the other men across the damp nighttime gloom. Not friends, traveling companions, fresh acquaintances, not yet attuned to the overlapping back and forth of amiable banter. His tone lacked authority. It was reedy and youthful, frightened and introspective. It asked a question that opened doors and windows to lurking shadows. Some inquiries are best left unspoken. Why would he seek this knowledge, which served not to enrich him, but insinuate Richard into whatever memories surfaced from a corrupt mind's depth of inky pitch? The gentleman on his right, older than the other two companions, stroked his dirty, ragged beard and grumbled in a higher register than one might presume he'd use. "Why you bringing up the past, Richard? If you weren't in it, shouldn't ask about it, I say. Besides, I don't never put my mind to such reminiscences, save when I'm dreaming. And all that comes of that is waking up too early and not falling back asleep." Richard opened his cracked lips to speak, but the other man continued over him. He was missing numerous teeth, and those that remained were brown and loose, resembling an incomplete jigsaw puzzle as he rambled. "But if I did pay it some consideration, I'd say I ain't done no bad. I ain't been done to me 100-fold worse. Nah, for it to be wrong, you gotta do it with your mind free and clear. Just 'cause you want to, and no reasons asides. Like the devil's compulsion. Not 'cause you have to and got no better choice or nothing. Like a fox running off with a farmer's chicken. They don't feel any of that there remorse, and neither do I. You know why?" His fingers were pallid as if held under water for hours. Disheveled hair and greasy clumps surrounded a mottled bald scalp. The few lingering hairs that remained in the middle were plastered across his head like stubborn homesteaders who refused to accept the boom times were gone, and their once fertile land worthless. At least his clothes were appropriately thick and robust for the falling temperatures of late fall. "Why?" Richard responded dutifully. The old man cocked his head, one eye squinting, the other wide. "'Cause every one I've ever knowed would have killed me first, if they were quicker on the draw." "What you talking about killing? You ain't no cowboy," mumbled a languorous individual laying on his back with his hands on his chest, fingers fiddling with a keepsake he'd pulled from a pocket. His thoughts seemed to be absorbed by the clouds above. "Only thing you ever kill is the mood, old-timer." He had a patchy beard, tasked with hiding a wide white scar just above his jawline on the left side of his face. Hairs had grown above and below it, but bent away like withering plants, searching for sunlight. His hands shook from the cold and damp, and a twitch beat a tattoo below his eye on the scar side. He did not seem well. Laying on the ground may not have been a choice as much as necessity. "Figaro speech, Kent," the old man said. "I'm splainin' that I got a clear conscience 'cause of what all's been done unto me. You see?" Plastic bags housing the group's belongings rustled when a lazy wind passed through, ruffling hair and leaving a goosebump chill behind. An overturned shopping cart lay discarded on the perimeter, and trash fluttered around as if bound by the evolutionary imperative to propagate. There was no fire, is why their voices all trembled, bodies shook, and breath created ephemeral puffs when they spoke. All their words contained mnemonic spittle. The foliage and sticks laying around were slick from recent rain, and the collective lack of competence to overcome such an obstacle was apparent. These were not men Richard should have much respect for. But did he? Did he think so poorly of himself that these were his peers? Or did he think them his betters, even? It was depressing to consider. It wasn't clear why he was with them. I entered the tale too late. The introductory chapters, ash in a cooled fireplace. But I was curious. Hard to understand. Like the affront to the English language the gumming fool employed as he justified his lifelong cycle of deviant behavior. These men were hardy, evasive weeds, while Richard was a nascent sapling emerging from a frosty spring meadow. He snuck a glance at the bundle on the ground, eyes drawn to the shape. "This is the worst thing I've ever done," he admitted, just above a whisper and quieting further as punctuation. The bundle was a small female laying in a fetal position, knees up by her chin. She was covered in dirt to such an extent that one might think she was clothed. She was not. She wasn't restrained or gagged, and yet didn't move or speak. Richard caught the glint from the whites of her eyes when she blinked, listening just like him. Listening to him. Watching Richard, watching her. Sat closer. Would his guilt be reflected in the oily black depths of her eyes? Would they frighten him? I suspect Richard thought she was a complication he could do without. It was not uncharitable of him to hold such an opinion. We all have a ledge we will not climb up to, that we may tentatively reach for before a voice inside edicts, "Not today," and we instead descend Well, most of us. Perhaps instead his idle thoughts promoted a fantasy wherein he waited till the men fell asleep, the two talking and the third man, heavy-set, greasy hair, reticent, and freed her. If he was quick and careful, he could toss her over his shoulder and tiptoe out, the burden of her weight inconsequential even upon his scrawny back. But then what? He could only carry her so far. It might be she prostrated where he placed her and expired, if not today, then tomorrow or the day after, gnawed on by animals or driven mad by thirst as her body consumed its own reserves for nutrition before eventual organ failure finally, miserably, finished her off. Richard really didn't have enough evidence to reach such conclusions, and it was my only projection that garnished him with such a dour soul. A nicer fantasy would have led to wedding bells and an invented shared past, Richard told to the good folks of his close-knit community while they organized food trains for the sick and dying. But that was not the sort of tale for this campsite. The older man adjusted the overstuffed plastic bag, replete with more plastic bags. A hobo Russian doll under his head. He was using it as a makeshift pillow. He first shot a quick glance at Kent before he asked Richard, "You regretting it?" There was a long pause. A silence you could fill with nuance reflective of a belief in people being inherently good or bad. The drone of the cicadas rose back up to fill the space between question and answer. The sky gazer shifted his weight to prop his head up on an elbow and studied Richard. Richard chewed on his lip and fretted. "It just doesn't sit right with me. It's different from stealing food and jewelry." With a shake of his head, the old man said, "Nah, if we was in a civilized world, maybe not here. Here, it's all the same, son. All the same. And sides, what was she even doing out in the woods all alone, unclothed like Eve herself? There was something wrong with her way before we done scooped her up." He spat on the ground. It was phlegmy and thick. "Did her a favor. She won't be missed, so she should be enjoyed, at least, even if there ain't much meat on them bones." Richard said nothing. Kent flopped over onto his back again, folded his arms beside his head, and said, "Stick or twist, kid. We aren't holding you hostage, after all. Exit is whichever direction you want to travel." Whether he'd seen the third man quietly rise from his tree stump throne, slowly sliding a knife out of a sheath strapped to a thick leather belt, and was giving Richard an opportunity to flee, or intentionally distracting him from his impending fate, who's to say? Either way, it served to keep Richard's attention on the wrong person. The knife eased across his throat in one Mississippi, two Mississippi. It was a poor blade to die to. Sharp, yes, but spotted with rust and loose in its handle. Man and weapon were no novice to violence, and there was nothing virginal about the act. There was no uncertainty. The man wiped his tool on the damp ground, one side, then the other, his expression unchanged. He was devoid of compassion, and would be the one to pay heed to. The other two, not so much. but that one would fight. It was exhilarating to dwell on the prospect of it.
That really necessary?
The old-timer asked, disinterested, just running the math, sussing out consequences, anxious to root through Richard's pockets for something he might profit off of.
One less hungry mouth to feed,
the prone man said to the clouds with a shrug.
Well, a man's gotta eat, it's true.
The older man nodded.
I got a worm in my belly, squirming a bit that this is the way it went down. But I knows we don't got no choice in the matter. Couldn't trust him no more.
Richard gurgled and coughed up blood onto his chin, hands clamped uselessly against its flow, bewildered by his fate.
It's just like I was saying to him, really,
the old man continued in an unrequested summary.
No act's bad if you don't got the freedom to choose another path.
Amen to that, brother, Kent affirmed.
Why don't you girls button them lips?
Richard's killer said. His voice was gravelly. It sounded a little put on, practiced and inauthentic. Learned from those bad ones that begat him. He leaned in closer to his companions.
Blades sharp enough for you two. Tutu,
the old man chuckled. After a brief but loaded moment of heavy stillness, Richard's murderer snorted a laugh and they all started cackling as if slicing a ragged chasm along a throat was the equivalent of a man stepping on a rake. The night was not fully dark. It rarely is. Ambient light created gray streaks through the sky as if a sloppy artist had mixed their paints on a palette. Neither was it silent. The bugs continued their stop-start cacophony, owls hooting their calls in response. Tree frogs belched intermittently. A dying man summoned desperate vocables, unable to form words. They sensed something more in the air, an intangible that made their blood run cold, and those tiny hairs stand up like a zipper running up their spines. It was a primal instinct that didn't provide the information they needed, directionless and elusive. Not that would have been enough to save them if it did. I wondered what had given me away. The scent of Richard's blood wafting into my nostrils had intoxicated me, as it flavored the breeze that rose and fell like a billowing sail. I might have reacted with enough relish to add an ancient, inexplicable dread to the atmosphere. Bear? The old man asked, unable to pinpoint this cause of consternation.
You best hope it ain't no bear if you want to see the dawn.
The killer paused.
Ain't no bear.
He was certain of that, but no more.
Someone tracking the girl, then?
No one wants that wretch,
he snapped.
Let me think.
A heavy silence of racing, wispy thoughts.
You worried, Tug?
Said the man on the ground, Kent, trying to hide his own misgivings. The voices had dropped to urgent whispers. The one they should have been responding to was the voice that pulled on their metaphorical sleeve, urging them to run. But these were foolish men, more concerned with what running said of their character than following their instincts. The old man unearthed a jagged rock. He checked its heft, tossing it loosely up in the air and catching it on his palm. Tug turned in small, defensive circles and peered out into the trees. Even the supine one was
up in a shaky crouch, his leg muscles quickly cramping up. Richard continued to die. What thoughts consumed him as he departed this mortal coil? Undoubtedly regret flashed before his eyes. Were there skeletons in his closet prepared to torment him, whittling bone to a fine point with which to torture him and prevent any peace and eternal sleep? The hunger had roused me, but I couldn't be reckless. Opportunity always knocked, or in this case, kicked. The gruff man with the quite absurd name asked,
Friends of yours?
and swung a boot into my ribs. His words were in direct contradiction to his recent assertion that I had no one. But the act itself was very mean and very much in character. I clamped my arms around his calf and sank my teeth into the beating pulse of his ankle, slurping noisily as it flooded my mouth. He shrieked most delightfully and tried to tear his leg away to no avail. He pulled at his knife, fumbling it out of the sheath, nearly dropping it, juggled it, and then drove it towards my exposed neck. I lifted an arm and took the blade through my palm. A parlor trick, really, seeing without looking, trying to overpower me. He put his weight into forcing the knife tip through my hand towards my throat. But my elbow did not buckle, nor did my wrist bend. He added his other hand, and my arm did relent. The tiniest amount. Such a brawny brute he was. I felt a flood of arousal, a warmth between my legs, but this was neither the time nor the place, so I flung him aside with the barest of effort. The knife ripped from my palm and slapped into the soil. He scrambled to his knees and groped for the weapon in the undergrowth. I allowed his fingers to locate it before I twisted his head clean off, the bones and tendons snapping and popping, but offering scant resistance. It was grotesque but quick, which was more than he offered Richard. I tossed the head into the lap of the old man, who whimpered and pushed it away, backpedaling, his feet creating valleys in the earth and taking him nowhere. He had on mismatched shoes, on the right foot laces untied, on the left eyelets empty, and toe caps scuffed away to gray, a half size too big. The Cloud Watcher was stumbling away through the woods. Good for him! I didn't think he had it in him. I watched him stagger blindly, his comical gait almost a skip, as he used one hand to hold up his pants and the other to steady himself against tree branches that swiped at his face and snagged his wool sweater. He tripped on a thick root and sprawled on the ground. It took him an age to get back to his feet. A turtle flipped onto its shell sprung to mind. Still, anchoring those pants in place, he putted little distance between us. I let him go. He was heading deeper into the trees in the wrong direction from salvation. He would be easy to hunt down, if I so felt inclined. He was not a priority. I straddled Richard. Remarkably, he persisted. As prone to hyperbole as I might be, it truly appeared that more blood was soaking into the ground than remained inside his small frame. Yet he took juddering, wheezing breaths while one loose fist clenched and unclenched at his side. I caressed Richard's cheek and then waved a hand in front of his eyes. They did not track the movement. Was it enough? I asked him. It was a vague question, but the tears that fell from one of those vacant ice-blue eyes suggested comprehension, and it was performative sentimentality to wipe the wetness from his bloody cheek and kiss him on the forehead. But it was part of my routine. My hair fell across his face like a mourning veil. Of course it was not enough. It never was. Not for the worldliest intrepid explorer, or the richest of nobility, or the most paternal loving grandfather in his dotage. Everyone wanted one more chance, one more day, a last-second reprieve. I pursed my lips and ruminated on the best course of action, but again it was theater. The decision was made the moment I first laid eyes on Richard. I believe it's the mother in me, a sympathy for strays. I had never chosen with even modest deliberation because I most assuredly had a type. I lifted his weak, thin wrist and took the smallest of tastes. A delicate kiss that broke the skin and began the ritual. I laid the bony limb tenderly back at Richard's side, then sank a fang into my own lip and placed my mouth unto his own. He choked and convulsed as my gift met his throat, so I angled his head just so, and let gravity exert its will. Watching Richard's eyes rapturously, I waited the spark that would deliver him to me. A twig snapped behind me. I barely had time to turn, but blocked the rock with one hand and grabbed the old man's wrist with the other. I squeezed as he gasped, which morphed into an anguished, elongated scream as I exerted pressure. His knees weakened as he slumped. I refused to let him fall, jerking him back upright, infuriated by his impudence. This scoundrel with a rock? I craved Tug's resistance, his Cro-Magnon fight response. Quite lovely, honestly. But for this feeble simpleton to confront his craven nature and deny me my blissful moment of creation in this ceaseless hard passage of time that buffeted us with biting cold winds, that crook our spines and weighted our every next step, plodding slower, ever slower, under layers of loss and hardship, as if I dressed in the old gentleman of Rahi. Vision obscured and every motion small, made arduous by relentless pressure as we inched towards semblance of joy. In a world so devoid of it, how dare he? How dare he? I wrapped him in a tight embrace and felt the slow shattering of his bones. It was a tactile pleasure, and I squeezed until there was nothing between my arms but a film of viscera. To interrupt the majesty of my child being pulled from the precipice of the black forever? I could feel my pulse thumping in my temple and focused on it until it centered me, dampening my fury. After all, what was it the odious worms said? Well, a man's gotta eat. I retrieved the final vagrant from his circular sojourn around the trees. He was actually closer to us than when I'd last seen him, possessed of a startlingly poor sense of direction for a man so enamored with the night sky. I dragged him across the forest floor like an old blanket, and placed him reverently in front of Richard. He had stopped begging for his life. The rough passage back to camp knocked the wind and wits out of him. Blood ran from various cuts and scratches, and I knew well the effect it would have on my newest child. Richard rushed past me on all fours and pounced on my offering, his new fangs sinking into the sweet spot on his neck, feeding greedily in that way babies do. suckling and draining, driven by the alarming insistence that he would need more soon and often. After all, Richard was a growing boy. I took my leave whilst his attention was otherwise engaged. My maternity was fleeting, my offspring precocial. I didn't look back. I'd given him all the tools for success. What more could a parent do than that?
Thank you, dear listeners, for venturing into the dark with me tonight. Return next week for another dark tale, lurking just beyond the veil. If you enjoyed your journey with me, support my work. Like, subscribe, rate, or leave a comment wherever possible. Most of all, share frightening tales and support the authors who dare to dream these machinations. Buy their books, read their writing, watch their videos, whatever you can. Until next time, when a new tale creeps across the airwaves, listen closely, if you're brave enough.